Hello everyone. So given the current state of events involving Iran, a particular event has happened that bears some historical significance with regard to submarine warfare. Now, I previously made a video on this just after the event occurred, but that was before we knew which submarine fired the torpedoes, so of course here I am making it again. So on 3 March 2026, the improved Los Angeles class fast attack submarine USS Charlotte, SSN 766, torpedoed and sank the Iranian Moj-class frigate IRIS Dena. This is significant because it's the first time in over 80 years that a US Navy submarine has fired a torpedo and sunk an enemy surface ship in combat. The last time this happened with a US Navy submarine was on 14 August 1945 when USS Torsk fired torpedoes and sank several Japanese escort vessels in the Sea of Japan, the day before the cessation of hostilities that ended World War II. Now, I'm using sea power to start off with because it's more cinematic, so to speak, and after this I'll show a quick mission I made in the wargame simulator Command Modern Operations with period-appropriate ships like the actual Dena. The thing here with sea power is that it basically stops in the mid-1980s and doesn't have the appropriate vessels, so I'm committing the sin of using the game anachronistically and not really for its intended purposes. Now, yes, I know there are a bevy of mods out there that already add modern vessels, aircraft, and weapon systems to the game, but I'm just using the vanilla version of the game. To that end, I've substituted a Flight 1 LA sub with early Mark 48 torpedoes and an Alvan-class frigate in the scenario. 4 of these Alvan-class frigates were built, and they began entering service in the 1970s. One of them, Sahan, was actually sunk by US A-6 intruders and a Harpoon missile from USS Joseph Strauss during Operation Praying Mantis in April 1988. Another, the Sabalan, was crippled by Mark 82 bombs from A-6 intruders but towed back to port and repaired. Now, sea power doesn't really model the effects of torpedoes particularly well. That is, the physics engine doesn't seem to simulate just what a Mark 48 torpedo actually does to a ship. Recall my previous video where I talked about sink exercises and how the torpedoes kept detonating against the sides of the ships. That said, sea power is very cinematic, so this is mostly here for eye candy. The Moj class is an Iranian-designed frigate, although they technically call them destroyers, but most people classify them as either corvettes or frigates. And they evolved from and succeeded the Alvan class. The Moj class were built in the early 2000s and began entering service around 2010. Now, I initially thought the periscope footage was from a photonics mast since it was showing infrared footage, but the Los Angeles submarines do have a Type 18 periscope, which has low light enhancement and IR imaging capabilities. And this image that they see can be displayed on a screen in the submarine's control room. The other periscope they have, a Type 2 attack scope, is also optical, but it does not have any low light or image enhancement capabilities. What is interesting though is that reports say that the Charlotte fired 2 torpedoes and the first torpedo missed. Of course, the second one did not. The detonation under the stern of Dena would also imply that the torpedo was passively homing in on the sound of the screws. The fact that the first torpedo missed does raise questions about the submarine's position and circumstances at the time of firing, since they appear to be broadside to the target and were close enough to get a good optical view of it through the periscope, although the image is clearly magnified. So did they have time to get into a favorable position and perform target motion analysis? Or did they simply snapshot off a couple of torpedoes? But it doesn't really seem that they did. Given what we know about the Mark 48 torpedoes, why did the first one even miss? Were they or were they not using wire guidance for the torpedo? If they were using wire guidance, did the wire break or did they cut it? And additionally, what mod of Mark 48 was it? I mean, we could speculate about this all day. We could play this game all day and night, but I'm just gonna stop there. Now, to my knowledge, the sinking of IRIS Dena actually represents the first use of Mark 48 torpedoes in combat. Now, we already know that these torpedoes work because countries that use the Mark 48s have done numerous SINKEXs with them, so it's not like the unreliable Mark 14 in World War II that never went through any testing when it was designed, and sub-skippers using it during the war found this out the hard way. Now, while this may be the first time since 1945 that a US Navy submarine has fired a torpedo in combat, there have actually been 3 other submarines, all of them non-US subs, that have sunk ships in combat since World War II. The first was on 9 December 1971 when the Daphne-class Pakistani submarine PNS Hangar sank the Indian frigate INS Kukri during the Indo-Pakistani War. And after that, we all know that the British submarine HMS Conqueror sank the Argentine cruiser General Belgrano, which was formerly USS Phoenix, during the Falklands conflict on 2 May 1982. She was actually the first nuclear submarine to sink a surface ship in combat, and Charlotte is now the second. Finally, on 26 March 2010, the North Korean 2-man Yono-class mini-submarine sank the South Korean corvette ROKS Chonan. Those are the only other known instances of submarines sinking surface ships in combat after World War II. Until now, of course. Now, apart from that, and what's recently happened, US submarines have also fired cruise missiles at targets during various conflicts in the 1990s and 2000s. Iraq, Balkans, Afghanistan, etc., just to name a few, but no torpedoes in combat until March of 2026. So it's basically been 80.6 years, or 29,421 days, since a US submarine fired a torpedo in combat during World War II.
Down scope.
Here we are in Command Modern Operations, and we actually have the appropriate submarine and the frigate Dena, so we can make a more historically accurate, quote-unquote, but less cinematic version of the event. The Mark 48 torpedoes Charlotte fired are another mystery as well. Now, the earliest versions of this torpedo have been in service since the 1970s. They were designed to combat high-performance surface ships and fast, deep-diving Soviet submarines. The Mark 48 can be either fired out of the tube with a slug of seawater charged from the impulse tank of a submarine, or it can swim out of the tube, which is much quieter. Official figures for the speed and range for this weapon are greater than 10,000 yards at 28 plus knots, but unofficially, it's thought that the weapon can go greater than 35,000 yards at 55 plus knots. The weapon itself can also be wire guided. The 2 wire dispensers together contained, it's believed, some 20 miles of fiber optic cable that allows the submarine and the weapon to communicate with each other. Essentially, the torpedo can transmit what its sonar hears in front of it back to the submarine and act as a sort of off-board sensor. The wire guidance also means that the torpedo doesn't have to turn on its active sonar seeker and give away its position, and this allows the firing submarine to use its more powerful sonar and fire control system to guide the weapon to the target via the wire. It also means that when the weapon is under wire guidance, nothing can decoy or interfere with it. Different attack profiles can be sent to the torpedo, and should the wire break, or if it's cut, then the torpedo can activate its computers and sonar, either active or passive acoustic homing, and search for its target based on its last instructions. The weapon also has re-attack capabilities. Should it miss the target, it could circle around, search, and re-attack its target. It's designed to not actually hit the target, but to go underneath it and detonate about 650 pounds of PBXN explosive, which is equivalent to roughly 1,200 pounds of TNT, plus whatever fuel is left in it. This detonation creates a massive void in the water, which lifts the ship out of the water and can buckle or even break the keel. Without the keel, the ship can't support its own weight, and the collapsing void beneath it means that the ship basically snaps itself in half and sinks. This has been demonstrated in numerous SINKEXs involving decommissioned ships getting torpedoed by Mark 48s of various types. As was seen in the video, the explosion lifted the whole ship out of the water, the stern buckled and broke off, and then it sank stern first. Now, we don't know which version of the torpedo sank the ship, but many people simply state rather generically that, oh, it's a Mark 48 ad cap. Now, ADCAP stands for Advanced Capabilities, and the ADCAP version of the Mark 48 began appearing with mods 5 and 6 in the late 1980s and 1990s, respectively. But prior to that, it was not an ADCAP, it was simply the Mark 48. The most modern version of the 48 currently in use is the Mod 7 CBAS, which stands for Common Broadband Advanced Sonar System. This began appearing in the early 2000s. There have also been more upgrades to the Mark 48 Mod 7 version, but the capabilities of those upgrades are still largely classified. The Mod 7 is the most advanced one that Command Modern Operations has anyway. In the end, honestly, I really hate doing videos on current events because information in this day and age changes so rapidly. Furthermore, I do strive to keep things apolitical, so to be blunt, I'm really not interested in anybody's thoughts on the current administration or the overall situation in Iran or in the world for that matter. I'll simply end this by quoting the late World War II historian H.P. Wilmot. He said something to the effect of, if you want to change history, then become a historian, so you can just write about it. In isolation, this event seems really impactful, but let's be honest, in the grand scheme of things, it's really just a small footnote in submarine history. Maybe someday we'll have a US submarine sink another submarine while both submarines are actually underwater. To date, there's been only one instance of that occurring in all of history, which has been the sinking of U-864 by the HMS Venturer on 9 February 1945. Other submarines have, of course, sunk other submarines historically, but in all those instances, one or both of the submarines are on the surface. So who knows, maybe in another 80 years, a US submarine will sink another ship with a torpedo. We'll just have to see. So that's all I have to say. Take care, everyone.